Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to build this cool typewriter effect in pure JavaScript, no kind of libraries or anything like that. It's going to be pure JavaScript, HTML and CSS. This is what the final product looks like. Okay, this could be cool like on a developer portfolio or something similar. That part is going to be up to you. I'm just going to show you how to do it. So let's go. Okay, so first off, let's create a project. I'm going to go ahead and call this JS Typewriter. So I'm creating a directory or folder, whatever you choose to call it, called JS Typewriter that lives in a directory called WebStorm Projects on my computer. So just go ahead and do the same using whatever code editor you wish. You can use VS Code, you can use whatever. Just make sure you have an empty folder or directory right here. And then we're going to add some files. So the files we're going to add are an HTML file. So it's going to be an index.html file. Just make sure to add the .html extension to let your code editor know to treat this as an HTML file. Okay, so there we go. And you can call this whatever you wish. I'm just going to call this typewriter. So this is the boilerplate code that WebStorm gave me. Please make sure to have the same before carrying on. So great, in here, I'm literally just going to have one element. It's going to be an H1 element, just like so. I'm going to pick it out by its ID because we need to pick it out in JavaScript. And I'm going to pick it out by the ID of text. So of course, this is all great, but we need to add a few more files. Another one being the style sheet. So I'm just going to call this styles CSS, or I could just select here because this is WebStorm and I can do that. So make sure yours also has the CSS extension to let your code editor know to treat this as a CSS file. Cool, and one more, so new JavaScript file this time called app.js has been added too. And now to link those up, well, the link element is going to essentially help us link up. So this is a self-closing element. This is going to take rel style sheet, and then as the href, we're going to put the path to our style sheet, which lives in the same level as the index.html file. So we don't need to go into any folders or directories. It just lives on the same level. So we just put the file name. And same with the app.js file, making sure it's after any elements that you have. So make sure it's at the bottom after all of them, and just use the script element this time. And as the source of this, we are, you guessed it, just going to have the app.js file. So that's literally it. That's all the HTML that I'm going to have. It's super easy. Okay, make sure to copy this before moving on. Now in WebStorm, I can just click here and it'll open it up. Or you can, if you're not using WebStorm, just make sure you're on the index.html file. And then you need to copy the path, copy the absolute path, and just paste it in like so. So you're getting the index.html file, you're viewing it in your browser, and it lives in the JS Typewriter directory that lives in WebStorm projects on my computer. So there we go. And if you inspect this page, you will see that in the body, it does indeed have the H1 element with the ID of text. So we know we're all good. Great. So I'm going to actually just minimize that. We don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of that. And perhaps let's style it up first. Again, this is going to have like very little styling because we really want to focus on the JavaScript of this project. So we're going to grab the whole body, and I'm just going to give a background color of dark slate gray. Okay, text align, we're going to do center. Again, so basic. I hope that you do something way more exciting than I'm doing now. I'm just going to do this so we get something going. We're going to initialize flexbox so that we can justify content center. So we can center everything from left to right, essentially. We can't use this line without that. So keep that in mind. And then let's also, I'm just going to give it a margin top of 200 pixels to space it from the top a little bit more as well. And we'll also, in fact, we can style elements by the ID. So I've picked out the element by the ID of text, hash is ID. And I'm also going to just give it a border right. So it kind of looks like that typewriter line that you see. I'll show you in a bit. I'm going to make it solid white to match the text color of 4 pixels. And I'm also going to give this a height. And the height of this is going to be 35 pixels. So if you save this file and refresh, ta-da, there we go. That essentially is a border. Okay, that's the border right that we did. We did it on the H1 element, so it looks like that. Cool. And that's it. That's all the styling. That's all the HTML. All JavaScript is going to be done from now on. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay. So I think first let's decide what phrases we're going to have. I'm just going to open an array and let's have 3 phrases. I'm going to have, hello, my name is Anya dot. Let's make this a capital H. Let's have another one. So as you will see, this is one item in my array, that's string. Let's also have I love to code dot, and then a third one, so comma, I love to teach. You can have whatever you wish. Maybe to make this a little bit more readable, I'm just going to put this on a few lines, okay? So you can see, and you don't have to scroll or anything like that because I've zoomed in quite a lot. So that is the 3 items we're going to have in our array. It's the 3 strings. Now we're going to have to essentially write a loop inside a loop. So in order to do that, let's write a function loop, just like so. And I'm just actually going to call it down here. Now, when we first start the function, I think let's go ahead and actually pick out the text display. So up here, I'm going to use document to look at my whole document. I'm going to use get element by ID to look for an element by its ID name. And we only have one in there, right? We have a H1 element with the ID of text. So I'm passing through the string of text to look for the ID. And let's save it as the const text display. Okay, so now if I grab text display, because at the moment we're not really doing much with that, right? If I console log this out and save that file and hit refresh and look at the console log, you will indeed see that H1 element with the ID of text. It's even being highlighted for us, but we're not doing much with it, right? We've just picked it out. I can actually grab that text display, so grab it here, and let's go ahead and use inner HTML. And I can do something like phrases and go into the first item in the array, and it should show that, right? Because we are getting the first item, which indeed is the string of hello, my name is Anya. But that's not what we want to do, right? We essentially, yes, we want to get that first phrase, but then we want to get that phrase and do another loop so that it displays each letter, okay? And then move on to the next phrase and do the same. Hence why I say we need a loop within a loop. So perhaps let's actually save the current phrase to let current phrase up here. I'm just going to get rid of that console log. Let current phrase equal, and I'm going to put it in an array. Okay, this is because we're going to want to save each letter individually in here. Okay, so let's do it. Let's start our loop. So first off, I think we should define some variables here. So just like in a for loop where you define the I as 0, I'm also going to define the j as 0 because that is going to be our secondary loop. And we're essentially going to call this function every so often. So I'm going to put on a set timeout and actually pass through this function here and then the time interval. Now the time interval is going to be different each time based on if we're at the end or not. I'm going to actually just define the const time just as something standard for now. So let's just go ahead and put it as 2000. Okay, so at the moment, I'm just going to console log print so you can see what is going on. This is just printing, okay? It's going to print every 2 seconds because that's essentially what we wrote it to do, right? 2000 milliseconds is the same as passing 2 seconds. It's the same thing. And then we call that function each time. So great, that is currently printing. And when do we want to print? Well, as long as I is smaller than the phrase's length, because I is going to loop over the phrase array. So 1, 2, 3 items in here, I length. So as long as it's smaller than I length, then we carry out the following. We're going to have to keep track of if we are deleting or not. So maybe let's do so up here. I'm going to set this as a let. Let is deleting. And we're going to start off with false because, you know, when we start the web page, we want it to type. We don't want it to appear deleting, so that is fine. So if we are not deleting, and this time we're going to have to take into account the phrase's length. Okay, so we're going to go into the phrases array, just like we did here. Apart from, we're not going to pass through a 0 to get the first item. We're going to pass through I, right? Because we are essentially looping over each of these phrases. So I, and then we're going to get the length. And we're going to check that j is smaller than or equals to the phrase's length, essentially. Okay, so obviously on the first loop, when I is 0 and j is 0, 0 is smaller than the phrase's length, correct? So we go here, we check if it's deleting, it is not, and then we check if j is also smaller than the phrase's length, which is 0. So yes, 0 is smaller than the phrase's length because this is a lot more characters than 0, so we can do the following. We are going to get the current phrase, and we're actually going to push each letter in here. So each letter of the first phrase. So we're going to go into the phrases again. We could pass through a 0 if we want the first one, but we're going to use I instead because I is currently 0. And then we're going to go into that string, okay, because you can use square brackets to go into a string, and we're going to pass through j, which means essentially the first time we loop over this, we're going to get this character, okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put that h into the current phrases array. If you don't believe me, I'm going to console log this so you can see. So I'm just going to do console log current phrase. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do, and we do indeed get the letter H, just like I said. Of course, it's just printing the letter H because we're just putting in I each time, so I is 0, so it's just printing H, 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 and it should keep on doing so. If we want to increment so that, you know, instead of passing through 0, we pass through a 1, we then, after this, need to increment j by 1. So that's the increment operator. So now, if I refresh this, we get the H, and then we get HE. So we're literally just getting each letter of the first phrase, and it will continue until the first phrase is completed, and then hopefully we'll see it loop to the next phrase as well. And it should do so until we essentially complete all the phrases. So it's even getting the comma, it's getting the space, as you can see, my name, and then a space, and then it should just get Anya and the dot. And like I said, then it should continue to the next phrase, I love to code. Great. So it's proved it, it's gone to the end. However, it did not continue to the next phrase. Why not? Because we didn't increment I by 1. So that is something that we're also going to have to do. But we only want to do it on the end of the phrase. So this is why I'm actually going to make another if statement. So let's check where this one finishes. This one finishes here. If j equals the phrases, we're going into the phrases again, we're going to get that first phrase because I is still 0, and then we're going to get the length. So essentially, if we're at the very end of the string, which we were, we could just get I and increment it by 1, and then it will essentially take us to the next string. Of course, we then also need to set j to be 0. So maybe let's just change this so it's a bit shorter so we don't have to loop over and over again. I'm just going to change it to Anya. And then we have A, N, I, A, dot, and then it should take me to the next one, I, L. So it's already spelling out the next one. However, we don't really want to go to the next one, right? We want to start deleting. So that's what we're going to do. I just wanted to show you how this loop works. However, we're going to change is deleting to true, and we're going to actually start deleting the letters visibly in the browser. But before we do that, we actually want to not just console log out the current phrase, I think we should also show it in the browser at this point. So once again, I'm just going to use inner HTML, and I'm just going to pass through the current phrase. However, I am going to use the join method to essentially join that array together minus the commas. Okay? So now that should just show up here, A, N, I, A, dot. Okay, and then we're going to change is deleting to be true, and we need to essentially write some code for when we are deleting. So great, here is the first if statement. In fact, let's also put this one in here. And then let's write if is deleting is true, and as long as j is smaller than the phrase's length, I'm going to get the current phrase, and instead of pushing a thing into it, I'm going to use pop to remove that last letter from there. Okay, and then we get j, and we, instead of incrementing, we minus it. And once again, I'm just going to display the text after joining it up minus the commas. So let's try again. Let's see if that works. A, N, I, A, dot, and then we should delete. Okay? So great. This is looking good. And once we delete, we of course want to start on the next phrase. So that is something we're going to write now. So I think after this, if is deleting, which it currently was, and j suddenly equals 0, so we've got to the very, very end. Let's actually just clear the current phrase. We're going to override the variable and just override it with an empty array. And then we change is deleting back to being false, right? Because we've deleted everything already. And then we get I and go to the next phrase, the next full phrase, so the next string. Okay, so that should go to the next string of I love to code and then I love to teach. However, if I then suddenly equals the phrase's length, so we finished all 3 phrases or however many we end up having in there, we then go back to the beginning, so we override I and just put it back to 0. So it starts all over again. Great, so that should now be it. Maybe let's just make these a bit shorter as well so it's really obvious. There we go. I will put these back, but I just want to prove that this has worked. So A, N, I, A. Next, we're going to actually work on speeding things up based on if we're deleting or just typing or not, or whether we've come to the end of a word. Okay, so Anya is now deleted. You will see that is gone. And then we're going to start a next one, which is code D, E, dot again, and let's go ahead and delete this. So of course, when you do your own, you can have as many phrases as you want. The code is written, in fact, to take into account if you have 5 phrases in there, 6, 7 phrases, 20 phrases in there. I really don't mind. This will work, okay? And then the last one is teach, CH dot. And then, of course, we delete it. This should really work with any phrases at all. So I think this is a great simple implementation in pure JavaScript that you can have on your website. And I absolutely love it. I hope I've explained it well. If you have any questions, let's see if it goes back to A. And it does. So we've proved this works. Let's put back the text. This should be I love to code. And hello, my name is Anya. The last thing I want to do, like I said, is just work on the time. So for this, I think we should also define if it's the end. So let is end equal. Of course, it's going to start off being false. And in here, I'm just going to put if j equals the phrase's length. We've come to the end of the string. So each phrase is end equals true. And now what I'm also going to do is define a sped up time. And this is going to be kind of random, so it looks like typing. I'm going to get math random, just call it, and I'm going to multiply it by 80. So I've just done this like completely randomly, and then let's put normal speed. Let's get math random again, and call it and multiply it by 300. Okay, so if is end is true, so if that is true, return back 2000 as the time interval. And then if is deleting is true, well then we want it to sped up because I want it to delete really fast. Otherwise, I just want it at normal speed. Okay, and each time we start this loop, is end is going to have to be false. Okay, we just want it for one beat essentially, and that is if we're at the end of the phrase. So now, see, it's sped up. This is looking much better, and then kind of stops. Okay, and then it deletes really quickly. So we reach the end, it stops, and it deletes really quickly. So I think that's a much better look. Of course, please feel free to mess around with the timing event as much as you want. Let's also make this a strictly equals. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that. I think this looks great. So my final code is here. I will scroll through very quickly again. So what we did was we picked out the text element. We created an empty array for the current phrase that we are working in. So this one right here. And essentially we are storing each phrase, but also when it's kind of split up by character. And we use I and J to loop. This is for the first loop of looping over items in the array. J is for looping over characters in each of the strings in the array. Deleting, we start off with as false as we're not deleting. Is the end, we start off as false because we're not at the end of the sentence. And yeah, we don't need to console log this out anymore. In fact, we should probably just get rid of any console logs. Here we add items to our array and increment J by 1, and here we are taking off the last item from the array using the pop JavaScript method, and then we are decrementing J as well. Okay, so cool. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. I absolutely love how this looks. Let me know how you've taken this, taken it to the next level, made your own, started it up. I would absolutely love to see what you have built with this.